Shopify Masters is powered by Shopify, the easiest way to sell online, in person, and anywhere in between. To get an extended 30-day trial, visit shopify.com/masters.
Branding is really, really important. In the early days, I think it's really overemphasized.
Hey, my name is Felix. I'm the host of Shopify Masters. Each week, we learn the keys to success from e-commerce experts and entrepreneurs like you. In this episode, you'll learn how to create a brand after you've launched, how to gracefully market your products in other people's Facebook groups, and how they pre-launched on Product Hunt and got over 20,000 email subscribers. Today, I'm joined by Si-Sun Lee from Morning Recovery. Morning Recovery is a science-backed breakthrough hangover drink that helps detox and counter the negative effects of alcohol and was started in 2017 and currently based out of Los Angeles, California. Morning Recovery has made $1 million in just their first 3 months, and today we're going to dive into how they did that. Welcome, Si-Sun.
Hi, Felix. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So $1 million in 3 months. Wow, that's very impressive. Let's take it back to the beginning. Where did the idea originally come from?
Yeah, this one's always tough because, my background prior to starting Morning Recovery was I was in San Francisco doing tech work. The latest before Morning Recovery was building product at Tesla. Prior to that was at Facebook. So in many ways, this is very serendipitous how I got started. And so it's very hard for me to pinpoint, at what point this even occurred, as a thing that I wanted to work on. So I think if we sort of go back all the way to the beginning, I'm Canadian. That's where I was raised since 9. Prior to that, I was born and raised in Korea. And I never had a chance to go back to Korea until I was as an adult. And so 2 years ago in 2016, that was my first chance to do so. And when I went, my goal was, that was my vacation, take 2 weeks off of Tesla, really explore the local scene, go meet my old cousins and family. And then just kind of figure out what life is like as an adult over there. I've heard all these kind of crazy nightlife stories in Seoul. But, I couldn't fully resonate because I didn't grow up there. And so that was really the goal. But when I went there, the big thing for me that I remember was no matter what activities I did or who I hung out with, every single night we would end up drinking tons and tons of soju, right? Which is like the Korean version of sake. And so part of that was waking up feeling terrible every single day in and day out. But the people that I drank with, the locals, would drink the same amount, but get up at 6, 7 a.m., put on their suits and go to work. And then they would swear by these drinks that are sort of bottled in kind of like a 5-hour energy drink format. And it would be called like the hangover drinks. If you translate it, like literally that's what it would be called. And so in many ways, I think that's probably the start of the inspiration. It took a long time until that became a thing that I started looking into, seeing the actual sort of the business opportunity, the science behind it. Because, from that instance of Korea, I never sort of immediately transitioned to, I want to make my own version, or perhaps I can sell something like this in the States. But I think if I really look back, that was probably the first time that this idea and concept was rooted at the back of my head. And then, fast forward a couple of months, I just remember in the States, I was sort of, as a consumer, almost furious that these products didn't exist. And so I would purchase bunch from overseas, from Korea, and then I would use them as a consumer. And then over time, just naturally, I would give it out to friends and family. I would consume it on my own. And then I would get a lot of these common questions like, oh, it works really well. Where did you get it? How did you get it? How does it work? Same questions that I had as a consumer. And so I think that led to me starting to research. And this was in early 2017. That's how I stumbled across some of the white papers published by Dr. Liang. At the time when she published, she was a PhD student at UCLA. That's how we got to know each other. And then one thing led to another. That's when we kind of realized that we like working with each other. We like each other's company. And maybe there's something that here where, we could potentially work together. And so a couple of months of doing this towards the summer of last 2017, it just grew really, really quickly. When we had the concept and some of the samples, we got launched and featured on Product Hunt. That's when we had over 20,000 subscribers join us requesting free samples. And that escalated to us actually trying to produce this at scale to see if people would buy it through Indiegogo, which is when we first launched our company and brand in July. And when that raised, and when that campaign raised $250,000 in 3 weeks, I think after that, everything was just sort of very organic. We just kind of followed the demand.
So good. Thank you for that story. I think it's very inspirational, where you discovered something on this journey of yours, where you were trying to figure out what to do with your life, and you came across this product that existed elsewhere, and you noticed that in your market in the U.S. it didn't exist, and that kind of got the wheels turning in your head. So you mentioned that you guys are featured on Product Hunt, 20,000 subscribers. That you're saying that's 20,000 people that signed up for your mailing list? Or like, what's the 20,000 number?
Yeah, so when we launched on Product Hunt, we had a bunch of samples made, with Dr. Liang at USC. When I reached out to her since then, she's moved to USC to become a adjunct professor. And we just needed more people to give this to. We already, surpassed the beta testing amongst our friends and family, which is inherently biased. And so we wanted to give to people that, we didn't have close degrees of connection with, and so which are strangers. And so we created a website where people could enter in their mailing address, and we would simply ship it out to them, a free sample. And that was and that listing surpassed 20,000.
Wow. Okay. So on Product Hunt, for anyone out there that's not familiar with it, can you say a little bit more about what is the Product Hunt website and how it works?
Yeah, so Product Hunt in many ways, it's like Reddit for startups. It's a forum where you can introduce new products and new ideas. And the way it works is that every day, the viewers and the audience would upvote it, so that you can increase your visibility, discoverability, and then based on that, get people's feedback. And so the interesting thing for us is that we didn't even actually post on Product Hunt. It's one of our friends who picked it up because we launched a website where we wanted to collect people's mailing address. He thought this would be really good for Product Hunt. I don't think he knew it either, and we certainly didn't know, but we definitely went super viral from this. I think part of it is because generally with Product Hunt, some of the products are really focused on software and internet. And so, all of a sudden when you have a drink like ours, it's very unique. So I think that probably got a lot of people's attention, which was to our advantage.
Right. So what did the Product Hunt listing say? Like, what did it say on that listing that made people interested in clicking over to the website? Like, how do you design? Well, I guess it wasn't you that created, but what do you think goes into a good listing or a good post on Product Hunt?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, I'm reasoning in hindsight. It's not like we've done a bunch of experimentation. Mm-hmm. We posted and it did well. So this is just my assumption. But generally, I mean, as with anything, when you're in a sea of multiple, in this case, like, you're competing against other postings, you have to have a pretty compelling story that's captivating. I think we just had that advantage of out of everyone who looks very similar, which is everything is around some kind of usually consumer related internet or software based product. Ours was a physical drink. And so we probably stood out. And then the story itself was usually a lot of the times, founders are very passionate about the product they're working on. They've worked on it for a long time versus ours. In many ways, it was very random because, I was building probably similar products that is very common with what's featured on Product Hunt, which is, when I worked at Facebook, when I built some of the referral apps at Tesla, these are things that I can relate with. And all of a sudden, here I am as the founder of Morning Recovery. It's completely unrelated. And it's based on my story of visiting Korea. So I think that was probably a little quirky, probably a little funny. So I think it's a combination of all of it, which is, do you have a compelling story that sort of gets people's attention? And I think after that, the actual upvoting and success is, really up to the product itself. So once people go to your website and they view it and it's compelling, the value prop is there, I think they'll support you.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have to stand out from what everyone else is doing, and in your case, you had a product which is different than what the other posts on the website were offering. They were offering more like software. Yours was a drink, was a physical product, and you also had a compelling story, which was something that seemed to be lacking in the other posts that were on the website. So people saw your product on Product Hunt. They clicked over to your website. What did the website say to collect 20,000 emails?
It was actually a super simple website that we didn't even custom build it. I mean, I guess we did, but we used Squarespace, which is, I guess, competitor of Shopify. We now use Shopify. Something that we can use very quickly to mock up a website. So it's a single landing page. You would simply scroll down. We had really three things, key messages that we wanted to tell people. One was, we're launching this new thing, and we want you to try it and give us the raw feedback, and it's completely free. I mean, that was the main thing. Second thing is we wanted to explain our science behind this. The thing that was a little bit different from us versus similar products in Korea was that the reason why we worked with Dr. Liang was we found out very quickly that how you improve the efficacy of a product like this has a lot to do with the actual intellectual property on how do you extract, in this case, certain plants and certain roots. How do you process it so that you can maximize the efficacy and control things like bioavailability. So we knew that what we were building, while it's the same concept as what's sold in Korea, it was very unique. And so we really wanted to highlight it, which is here's actually how the science works. Here's why ours is superior to different competitors. And by the time we launched on ProductCon, even though this wasn't a big category in the States, versus Korea, we soon found out there were actually a lot of competitors out there. So we really wanted to stand out. And for us, the biggest value prop was, aside from branding, pricing, distribution, all of that, which we didn't have at the time because it was just samples, we wanted to help people understand in a very simplified way what the science was. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing is just, by the nature of design, optimizing it so that, we want as many people to give us their mailing address as possible, because our goal here was to get as much samples sent out as possible so that we could get real feedback. And so website, it's no longer, live now, but you can imagine it's just a single big landing page with big call to action about samples, with one small diagram of very simplified science, and then a giant button for you to sort of subscribe with the form to enter your mailing address. And then that was it. And then, we didn't really have a big follow-up. Probably people had no idea how this was going to work, like when we were going to give it to you. The mailing address, once you submitted it, went to Google spreadsheet that we had. And then, we just basically followed up and just started sending samples out.
Okay, so 20,000 emails. Did you have 20,000 free samples to give out?
No, we actually had about 1,000. And so it was definitely overwhelming. We were pretty freaked out. One was we reached out to the sample recipients once we depleted our samples, basically telling them, hey, we ran out of it. A lot of people actually were offended by it because they thought this was like a marketing campaign done by a brand, like, hey, here's free samples, but hey, actually, we don't have samples. We just wanted your mailing address and email address. But yeah, it is what it is. We definitely underestimated the demand we could have gotten. But the good thing is we wanted to figure out, okay, what do we do with these other subscribers? Because they're obviously interested in us, and just because we don't have samples, we don't want to alienate them. And so initially our plan with sample giveaways was we had some structured surveys that people could subscribe to and fill out. But instead, we created a Facebook group, which is still live today with active 2,000 members. And the group was called Morning Recovery Feedback Group. And we asked our 1,000 sample recipients to just simply join this group and give us an open-ended real feedback. And then we let the rest of the subscribers who didn't get the samples be aware of this group so that at least they could join and then read and hear about what other strangers had to say about it. And so in that way, we sort of started creating this community where half of it was like, real customers. The other half were just people just interested in what people had to say about it. And which was really powerful because that community sort of ended up really helping us drive our Indiegogo campaign later on.
I love that. I love that you're able to create this community, and then they're just essentially creating a lot of content for you with these discussions. And then people that are not never got the product or didn't get the product yet because they weren't part of that first 1,000, they're at least able to get an idea of what it's like from like you're saying, a stranger, someone that's unbiased in their feedback. So on the Facebook group, how did you manage the feedback? Because like you said, it's all open kind of format, and I'm sure you're getting tons of different things. How did you collect all this data and make use of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was very qualitative. And, the thing with sample recipient is that even though it's a verbal contract, I'm giving this to you so you can give me real feedback, the conversion isn't 100%, right? So out of 1,000 people we gave, we ended up getting about 250 actually written posts about them, which we thought was still pretty high.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was a very open feedback. People would write about it. Not everyone had good things to say, but overwhelmingly, it was very positive. Like 90% plus would say really good things. Other people would say, "Oh, it didn't work." But we also had a control group of placebo, at least that we tested with our friends and families, so that we can sort of understand, okay, well, what is a baseline of placebo? Because with any product like this, even if it actually works at the scientific level, people won't report it 100%. And so it was super qualitative, and we wanted to just understand, like I think with anything qualitative, we can only make sort of only draw sort of very clear and pattern conclusions. If it was very, very mixed reviews, there's not much we can draw out of it, but we wanted to see, hey, is this like overwhelmingly people are saying very positive things about it, especially under efficacy. Of course, people had some other thoughts on the taste as well, and things that are a little bit secondary. But generally, when we sort of did the math and went through every post and sort of ranked whether this was like highly positive, neutral, or like negative, and it was sort of 90% plus highly positive, we kind of drew the conclusion that, hey, it worked. And the reason why we wanted to get people's feedback in the first place anyways is because prior to this, we already tested it amongst ourselves. We knew the science of it, which is something that we study on the mice level at USC. So you can measure things like what's called GABA potentiation in the brains of the mice, and then the breakdown of acetaldehyde, which then you can transfer to sort of extrapolate how that would be done on humans. But not only that, like we tested it on ourselves, we gave it to our friends and family. So we had a huge conviction that, hey, this like really, really works. But the giving it to strangers at a sort of a higher scale sample for us was just to say, okay, hold up. We could also be very biased because we want this to work. Let's just see and make sure that this is true when we scale this to like 100,000 samples. And so it was more of a validation. And so if we saw that, less than 80% of the people said very positive things, I think then we would have sort of said, okay, well, hold on, like there's something here. Maybe it's not working for everyone. Why? Let's figure out what to do next. And so that was a type of the data that we wanted to collect. But once we found out it was very positive, we then went very quickly into producing this and launching it on Indiegogo.
Got it. So you were looking to get that kind of validation to see if you're on the right track. You weren't necessarily looking for individual features or individual changes that the customers wanted, unless you saw it overwhelmingly in the comments or in the feedback. You're just trying to see, is it something that we should invest our time and money into? And you recognize that when you saw that 90% of the comments were positive, and then you decided to move forward. So what was the next step? Like, how did you, once you guys recognize, okay, everyone's saying, for the most part, saying great things about this, is move forward. How did you guys spend your time moving forward?
Yeah, I think the difficult part, especially for me, building something like this, even though it's a functional beverage, it is a brand, it is a lifestyle brand. That the goal is that with mass appeal, is that unlike tech, we can't really iterate. Like I'm not building a website or app where I simply launch, A/B test quickly, figure out what works and what doesn't. Like this is an edible product, and you have to do it, get it right, especially because of the safety of consumers. And so the difficult part was we wanted to launch really quickly, but then you have all these questions like, okay, what's the right pricing? What's the right flavor? What's the right amount? Like, is it 100 milliliter, which we ended up doing? Should we do more? What does the packaging look like? And these things were really hard because we couldn't simultaneously launch digitally and get people's feedback. Yeah, we can do some samples and surveys digitally and get people's feedback. Ultimately, we had to pick and choose, with sort of some proxy data, and then live with it, and then know that, okay, at some point in the future, we can change it, but we won't be able to iterate quickly. So I think we just started deciding what is like the most important thing here that we just have to get right, and what are other things where if we make assumptions and we get it wrong, it's still okay for us to move forward. And for us, that was efficacy, which is what we were trying to test with the sample program. Ultimately, we knew that the value prop of this was very sort of one-dimensional, which is it helps you when you consume tons of alcohol so that the next morning you can get back on your feet and do more of what you love. And so if we knew that that problem was solved, other things like taste, pricing, the branding, the packaging, we at least thought, at least I did, especially with an engineering mindset, we thought they were less relevant. So and we were wrong for many reasons because obviously branding is very critical. But we sort of launched really, really fast. We basically said, forget about all of it. Like, of course, like we will use our gut feeling, and we hope that we're ballpark right. We picked peach flavor. The question becomes, why peach flavor out of so many when brands who introduce beverages take 6 months just to do just to optimize the flavoring. I picked it because I like peach. Like, it was like very simple. I kind of thought, okay, I don't care about this as long as it's not too bitter, and as long as I like it, I think most people will like it, etc. And so I think a lot of it was just sort of ignorance on my end, because I focused purely on the science and efficacy. And so when I had sort of full conviction with the validation of samples, we just went on and went to launch this. So all these other things, very simple. We picked glass bottles because at the time we were working with co-packers in Korea, and those type of glass bottles in Korea is sort of the most used commodity. And so we would get it for about 1 cent per bottle. So it's super cheap. Why not? Let's use it. So that kind of reasoning. And the thing that took us time to launch it was just more on the regulatory stuff, which is, sure, like we can decide what to print, what the label would be, what the packaging is, what the flavor is. But we have to make sure that when we sell it as a product in the US, we're regulated as a dietary supplement. There are some rules to follow. Certain different places, different factories that you can work with versus you cannot. And so that was all new to me. So that took about 3 months for us to get it right. And then once we thought, okay, we know what we're doing in terms of when we sell this is safe for consumers, and it's compliant, with the regulations within the US, we're good to go. And so that was in July. So we then launched Indiegogo campaign in July.
How did you make sure you were compliant? Did you have to work with anyone to help you understand that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with attorneys, our own consultants. Basically, that's the way we did it. Yeah.
Got it. And if someone out there wants to go down the same path, like, how do you recommend they find experts to help them out with the regulations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sort of, we look at it in a tier system. Like it's costly. Like when you work with lawyers, I think with a kind of an industry, you're paying them by the hour, and it's cash. And so I think like and that's a barrier to entry. But when you're talking about creating a physical good that's for consumption, like there really isn't an alternative path. Like you can't hack your way, right? Which is another thing that was difficult for me to wrap my head around, which is this isn't as simple as building MVP and launching something digitally. Like you are creating something that people would take. If you're trying to hack your way and speed that up, I don't think that's a good idea. And so my advice is like, if you don't know the regulations, there's some stuff that you can do to help yourself by just simply reading and learning. And then you can sort of ask the right questions with the attorneys to save some time and, save some cash. But ultimately, I think you do have to rely on experts to make sure that this is perfectly compliant and safe. It just comes down to, when do you do this? We could have done this earlier on, but I think that would have been waste of money. We did it when we sort of had, the real demand behind this, even though it was samples, the real community behind it, to kind of know that, okay, we know that when we launch this, there's some lower sort of boundary of people who would end up buying, because that's the community that we've been interviewing and asking, and they're behind us. And so when we kind of had that belief that there is demand out there, it made things easy for us to, drop some money to this going. I mean, I think we ended up paying like $30,000 in that 3 months, which was quite a bit for, a project at the time. Yeah. Which is $10,000 a month. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely a big risk. But like you're saying, because you have that community that you built already, and yet there's 20,000 emails, and you recognize that there was some kind of interest, some kind of demand in the marketplace, you de-risked yourself by at least putting that upfront work in. So you mentioned that there are some important questions you have to ask these experts. Do you remember any important questions? Like, what are some of the most important questions you should be asking experts that you're working with when you are interested in releasing some kind of food or beverage product?
Yeah, I mean, I think for someone like me who's never done this, it was just about understanding the whole thing end to end, in terms of starting from like, why are you being regulated? Like, and then kind of going into which category are we being regulated under? Like food and beverage is different, dietary supplement, which is different from pharmaceuticals. And you got to make a deliberate choice on which route you want to take. Like for us, we could have taken the pharmaceutical approach, but there's much more downside in our opinion than going into a dietary supplement. But when you choose your path, like it also limits some of the things you can do and advertise. As by being a dietary supplement, we cannot make claims like, this solves hangovers, for example, 100%, because then it would be sort of classified as a drug. And so there were some downsides and upsides. So you need to just like fully understand that. And that's more on the compliance side. So I think it's just like understanding from the FDA, I guess in Canada, it would be Health Canada, but in the US, what are they looking for? Why? And once you sort of understand that, subsequently, when you work on different products or new releases, it makes things just much more simpler.
Got it. So now you then launched on Indiegogo. What made you choose Indiegogo as the crowdfunding platform?
Like this is the first time I'm actually making this very public. But hopefully this is a fun story for anybody who wants to launch their own product. We were going to use Kickstarter from the very beginning, just because that was a bigger brand, and you can use a launch in any platform on your own, but we thought based on sort of the community that we had, we then got featured on Business Insider. We thought we could demand an account manager in Kickstarter to help us really guide us. So we reached out to them, and we soon realized that Kickstarter actually doesn't support dietary supplements. It's just like based on sort of their risk profile. It's not something that they're willing to sort of support on their platform. We found out like 3 days before we were supposed to launch. And we never told people where we were going to launch. Actually, it was part of we just wanted to let them know that it's launching without telling them where, which ended up being in our favor because we found out 3 days ago we couldn't launch. And so we then knew that the only option we had was Indiegogo. But what's really funny is that we then reached out to an account manager at Indiegogo and sort of made this like bold stance where we said, hey, in 3 days we're launching on Kickstarters because they're bigger and they're going to give us more reach than Indiegogo. But like, can you like convince us why we should choose you guys, them? And then they gave us a bunch of amazing promos, put us on the front page, gave us 2 email shout outs, gave us a discount in the fees that we have to pay them. But like, we had no choice. We were only going to go with Indiegogo. But we try to leverage as much as we can get. And then we got it. Thankfully, they didn't, I guess, realize that we weren't allowed on Kickstarter. And so we sort of made it seem like we made the last minute change. We launched with Indiegogo, but ended up getting all these perks because they were, ultimately for them, they're losing key clients to Kickstarter, and they wanted to give them sort of more promos. And so we, on top of getting that, we were able to launch an Indiegogo on time.
Wow, very, very bold, but certainly paid off. What did you have? What did you guys bring to the table that made them say to go after you so aggressively?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what we found out was that a lot of it is just like an existing customer base. What the account manager on both sides actually told us in the beginning was that the success of your campaign is going to really, really come down to the first sort of 24 hours. And after that, it's just this virtual cycle where if you do really well, you get more visibility in the platform. And then people who view it, if they like to back products that's already trending and has the most likelihood to being successfully funded. So it all makes sense. And so the question becomes, well, it's a chicken and egg problem. Like, how do you get it off the ground in the beginning? And it just comes down to your existing customer base. If you have a large email base of people that are already interested in you, and then you can sort of blast them an email, let them know your existing community, and they kind of come in, even if it's a small amount, and sort of uplift that campaign in the beginning. That's going to drive a lot. And so we kind of came in with, I mentioned we had 20,000 email subscribers, but that was like just like the first kind of week when ProductCon launched. In the following subsequent months leading up to Kickstarter or Indiegogo, we had about 60,000 email subscribers. And so I think that really got their attention. And by that time, some of them already knew about us, like because they were familiar with Product Hunt. They saw our article on Business Insider. So I think that's their proxy to figuring out if this is going to be successful or not, which is how much sort of existing hype do they have, and how can they leverage that to bring in early consumers in the very beginning stages of the campaign.
Wow, so you guys grew your email list by 3 times between the initial product on launch and then the Indiegogo campaign. What were you doing during that time to continue to grow that email list?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was sort of rooted back to Product Hunt. So once Product Hunt did really well and we got the early customers, then we got picked up by other press and media outlets. Uncrate, which is sort of that highly engaged but very niche, journal that discloses new products. They picked us up because they saw us on Product Hunt, and from there we got a whole bunch. And so it was sort of these like discrete, not sort of continuous or any kind of exponential growth, but rather Product Hunt started, and then Uncrate picked us up, and then Business Insider picked us up. So between those three, we definitely got a huge volume of traffic.
And it was all driving to the same landing page.
Exactly.
Okay. And did you pitch them, or did they just find you through Product Hunt? Like, how were you able to get on these big publications?
Yeah, they all reached out to us. Uncrate, they just picked us up and then wrote about us. Business Insider reached out to us. We did an interview, and then they featured us. And so I think just everything goes down to Product Hunt, really. That's really what sparked it all. And then we definitely leveraged on our story, which we thought was pretty unique. It's kind of cliche working in Silicon Valley, where this was a small side project, but everyone viewed this as a niche, like biotech stealth company, which that was hilarious. But we leveraged it, and we went along with it. And then part of the reason why I think Product Hunt is successful, which I didn't touch on, is we didn't know who our demographics, like customers, were. We had some ideas, but like this is the first time we're even giving samples away at scale. We didn't know who to sort of target. But it ended up like Silicon Valley was perfect. These guys were people with high disposable income who work really, really hard. And they also like to go out and just go back and be productive. And like it's very similar to like probably profile at Shopify, right? People working at Shopify. And then not only that, I think people could probably resonate because I was from Silicon Valley, and I worked at companies that they're very familiar with. So I think it all sort of tied together.
Yeah, I think your kind of success is certainly hard to achieve with that initial boost and then the subsequent big publications, but I think the kind of lesson here is the same, which is to focus your attention on getting some kind of attention on one platform and then leverage that. And in your case, they reached out to you, but I don't see why someone out there, if they had some success on the platform and some buzz, like I don't see why they wouldn't be able to go and just try to pitch a publication if they're not getting picked up, just by publication finding them. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to go out and just try to get that free press. So I think that lesson is the same, which is to try to find success in one place and then try to use that to build on top of it by reaching out to these publications. Say, hey, look, we're buzzing. There's a lot of attention here, and I'm sure your readers might be interested as well, and then go from there. So one thing you mentioned was that you're kind of like riding this wave where people recognize you guys, almost categorize you in a certain way. And why didn't you just say, hey, no, that's not what we are. This is what we are, and like kind of define it yourself? Like, what made you guys decide, let's just go with what people are attracted to and what they are really excited, I guess, to categorize you guys as? Yeah,
so I'll answer that, but the one thing that is very, very critical here is that I think whatever you're selling, like regardless of all these buzz and hype that you can get, it's all very temporary. At the end of the day, I think you have to sort of deliver a very clear value prop. Without it, nothing really matters. And I think one thing that was pretty compelling for us is that once we started opening up our Facebook community group, we actually updated our website to showcase the reviews within the website so people can read it. It's very hard to provide an attribute of, well, how much of that created an incremental impact on people signing up for the emails. But one thing for sure is that when you have 90% plus people who try your product taking their time to give you a review, and these reviews were not one sentences, they were literally paragraphs after paragraphs after paragraphs. And they were very emotional customers saying, like, I'm a mother of two. They kind of went a little over beyond what we expected.
Yeah.
And so, I think it definitely has that impact. They're also the ones that ended up buying Indiegogo as well. So 50% of our sample recipients that we tracked by email ended up purchasing us on Indiegogo. And so, like how much of that versus the media exposure we got is what created the initial sort of growth? It's very hard to know. But I think without the product actually having a functional benefit, and without that retention and community, I don't think this would have been sustainable. And sort of going back to your extra question, which I forgot.
I was just asking, like you mentioned that you guys didn't really have a clear definition of what you were initially, right? And then
yeah, absolutely. So I think the true answer is we didn't know either. We decided to quit our jobs. My co-founder was at Uber at the time. I was at Tesla. We quit our job at the end of July after Indiegogo was successful. So leading up to that, this was a side project. That's, like our definition of side project obviously grew from early days to realizing that we're spending more time doing this than our actual jobs. But we were curious at ourselves too. Like, what could this be? Like, what is this? Why do people like this? How much would they pay for? What should the branding be? So these were all questions that we had going into it. So, if we sort of got in this angle of, oh my God, like this is a product that we want to work on and we've been working on it for a long time and go with sort of very strong conviction of what it should look like, I think we would have definitely came out with a stronger sort of branding. And that's kind of why 8 months later, post our Indiegogo, we did a rebrand update. Based on, okay, this is what we learned. This is who we want to be. Here's a gap and here's a rebranding. So in the early days, I think it was just like generally, we didn't know what this could be either mentality, but we wanted to keep it going, keep the momentum going, and then see what it could be. So it took some time.
Got it. So real quick to cover the Indiegogo success. So you raised $250,000 on there, backed by almost 5,000 backers. How much of that was happening in that? Because you mentioned the first 24 hours is the most important. How much of that was happening in the first 24 hours?
I believe we got the first quarter of it in the first 24 hours.
Okay, yeah. Wow. And then from there, did they promote you guys right away from the launch time, at the launch, or was it sometime later in the campaign?
It was sometime later in the campaign, but when we first launched, it's a soft launch, right? Indiegogo isn't really featuring us. Mm-hmm. But it was crazy because I had the Indiegogo app and it vibrates every time someone buys. But as soon as it launched and we sort of sent our email blast to tens of thousands of our customers, the first hour was just ridiculous. Like the phone would vibrate so often that it just doesn't seem like it's vibrating, because there's no frequency anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the same thing with Shopify, where you get that first cha-ching when you make a sale. There's no, a lot of times I hear from merchants that there's no high that's better than that first one. So after a while, you get a little immune to hearing it. So you mentioned that you guys rebranded, but almost sounded like you were creating the brand for the first time after already having a business that was selling a product. For anyone else out there that does have a business and kind of just launched without a clear definition on what they represent, who they represent, like their brand, what tips do you have here? Like, how do you begin down the process of creating a brand after you've already started your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think the core thing is, I think for any commerce, it's a trade-off. Like someone is trading their cash for some product or some service, I guess. Doesn't have to be a real tangible product, and it just has to be super compelling. So even though we didn't have a very clear definition of what this branding was, it was very clear what the functional benefit was. It's a hangover drink, at least in the minds of consumers. And so for them, I think the people that bought it, even if they haven't tried it, with all of the risk of it maybe not working, but with all of the upsides and sort of de-risking it by looking at what other people had to say about it, like positive reviews, paying $5 so that you can have hours back, or maybe for some people multiple days back, was a compelling value prop. And so I think that has to be the most clear thing, in my opinion. But again, this is something that I'm reasoning in hindsight. Like this is we launched, and a lot of things we learned as we went. So it's very hard to do comparative analysis. But at least for me as a consumer, that's what it comes down to. Like, am I willing to pay for pay X amount for this. And so, even in absence of sort of clear branding, and I think like branding is really, really important. In the early days, I think it's really overemphasized. Like, no one knew what morning recovery was in the beginning. Like, even we get obsessed. I get obsessed as a founder because my first 1,000 customers of community, I'm so actively involved with them and I hear them. So I feel like, we already have an established branding, and if I deter away from it, that's like that's all of our efforts sort of shifting to building something completely new. But in reality, in grand scheme of things, even today, 10 months later, and actually 6 million revenue in, most people don't know morning recovery. And so if we have to revisit and sort of revamp our branding, I don't think the loss is as big as we think. I think there's like this bias there. So, if you're just kind of launching it, I think the general sort of default is no one knows your brand anyways. And I would rather overemphasize on experimenting the branding early on rather than trying to stick to it with the sunk cost bias that if you switch, like you're going to lose a lot of what you already gained, which I don't think is true, because to you, like that's your baby. That's what you think about. For most people, they just simply don't know what it is. That's kind of how I do it. Yeah.
I really like that approach though, because it goes back to getting that feedback and really involving your community, involving the customers. And you're just basically saying, experiment with the branding in the beginning. And it sounds like what you really try to focus on was emphasizing the value prop and trying to answer that question: what is the promise that we're making? Are we delivering on it? And then making that very clear, and then letting the customers kind of surround around that value prop, and then by just looking at the audience, then the customers that you've built, the branding kind of comes out of it. So once you have an understanding of who your customers are, who your demographic is, who the market is, what were the steps towards creating to I guess make that branding more concrete? Like, what actual tasks or activities did you guys have to do to make sure that you guys solidified this new brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think branding is a little bit more. It's a mix of art and science, and I think the biggest thing, especially for startup, is that you have the luxury, because you don't have that many customers early on, and hopefully you stay close to them. You can like hop on a call with them and just ask them, and that's what we did. Like our entire team, myself, my co-founder, we would email people, for permission based on surveys, and then we would just like hop on a call and talk to them, and we wanted to understand for people that didn't like it, why. For people that kept buying us and, referring other people, what do you like so much about this? And part of it was understanding who they were. And you don't have to like ask very, very sort of direct functional, multiple choice type of question. Mm-hmm. It could be very open-ended, and you'd be surprised how much they're willing to help you. Like for these consumers, like they're early adopters that are sort of finding value in not just the product, but being the first ones to try this. Like it's cool. They're the first ones to back you in Indiegogo. And so when a founder especially reaches out to them and, gives them the time of the day to hear their response, what I found was that instead of them being annoyed because it's kind of like, free sort of, giving away their time for free. But for many ways, like many times, they were very glad. And with many of my customers, what was supposed to be a 5-minute phone conversation became 20-minute, 30-minute, multiple 30-minute calls, even sometimes an hour, depending on how it went. And I think, that's the benefit you have as a startup, is that not everything is at scale. You can do things that don't scale because, clearly this isn't something you could probably do at this level when you 10x your customer base. And so when you talk to them, I think you learn two things, like clearly who they are, like what is their demographic. And then the two is just like, why are they buying this? Aside from the functional benefit, because it's the same for everyone. Functionally, you buy this for the same reason. When you go out and drink, you do this because you want to wake up, at the top of your game. We understand that, but just like emotionally, what resonated with you to buy this from the first place and have you come back? And we learned something very interesting. Demographic-wise, it was very broad. On average, our actual segment of customer is in the late to middle to late 30s. And then it sort of it goes on, like from the early 20s all the way to late 50s. which we thought was like odd in the beginning because we thought with this type of drink, maybe college students, fraternities and sororities in the US would be the peak. But it actually turned out it was very broad, and people
Yeah,
were.
I feel like they might not need it, right? People in college recover a lot faster.
And then the second thing is we found out, like we asked quick key questions like, well, how much alcohol do you normally consume? With or without morning recovery. And generally, most of our consumers don't actually drink a lot, which was very bizarre to us. Like, why are you buying morning recovery when you're taking 2 glasses of wine? We don't understand. But for them, I think with age, and especially, they have so much responsibility to take care of the next morning. They have to wake up, take care of their kids, prepare for their work, their important presentation, or go for a run or exercise. Time is very valuable for them. So for them, paying $5 so that even though they might only be very slightly tired the next day if they don't take this, and not necessarily, having to rest on bed for 24 hours, even saving that time and being extra productive was a very important sort of emotional thing for them. Being able to do more the next day of whatever it is that they love to do. And so we kind of realized that it wasn't really what we were kind of selling wasn't really just about solving hangovers so you can drink more. It was really about empowering you to be at your best the next day, so that even when you do consume alcohol, whether it's little or a lot, we sort of guarantee that you're at your best self the next day without missing a beat. And it became very clear to us that this was more about people buying it to be productive rather than preventing hangovers. And so we kind of realized that that's actually really good for us. For one thing, is that we don't just focus on heavy drinking consumption events and heavy drinkers. This is much more broader, has a much more appeal or at the potential of it. And so after thinking about it, we pivoted into really focusing on that angle. And luckily, morning recovery, when you take the first 2 letters, spells more. And we realized that everyone wanted to do different things, do more of different things the next day. Some people wanted to run, take care of their kids, go to work. But what was very clear, and that was a common theme, was that they wanted to do more, be able to do more of what they love. And so it just kept coming, like that phrase of doing more kept coming back to us. So we just thought, hey, this is great. Like this kind of aligns with morning recovery in terms of the actual phrase. Let's own the phrase of being able to do more. Like what we're offering is a drink that helps you, empower you to be at your best so you can do more of what you love. And the next SKUs of the products that we're going to launch that's not related to alcohol, it's still going to be in the same realm of empowering you to be at your best physical and mental state so you can do more of what you love. And so, based on what you learn from your customers, it definitely filters down to what type of brand you should build, but I don't think it's very scientific. Like we could have probably taken 2 to 3 different alternative approach, but I think it just kind of helps you narrow down once you actually take the time to talk to customers, especially early on. At least that's how we did it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think it's also important to note that you need to, going back to what you were saying earlier, you need to have a compelling product, an interesting product, or a compelling story, which makes people excited to be involved and excited to be a part of what you're working on. You have a very boring product, very boring story, then maybe they won't be as interested in being involved. But I think having that, again, that great product and piquing people's interest, they want to be involved in something that's different in their lives, right? So I think it's important that you nail that part down first before you begin down anything else, which is something you guys obviously did. So that after initial Indiegogo success, that going back to that $1 million in the first 3 months, where did the rest of that come from? How were you able to continue the revenue growth from there?
Yeah, so after Indiegogo, it ended, we decided to launch our own e-commerce platform. We obviously chose Shopify. First few weeks were very, very low on revenue. We were doing like a couple of hundreds a day. People just didn't know where to find us, right? Like Indiegogo had that exposure, landing page. Once we come to our own website, we never promoted it. So it took some time, but I think ultimately it took down to lots of iterations and A/B testing. I think this is probably the first time building the company where my skill set actually made an impact, which was I did growth work. And so I looked at this as purely a funnel. How do I optimize this funnel so that I can get as much throughput as possible, and that means at scale, what's the lowest sort of CAC that I can get into, which is like a customer acquisition cost. And so early on, when it was just digital and e-commerce, the beauty is that you can measure everything. So we didn't do anything offline marketing that wasn't attributable, that I couldn't attribute back towards the actual revenue. So everything we did was performance advertising. We understood that, well, we have a 6-pack, so that's the minimum order you can get. We kind of knew what our average order value is based on what people bought on Indiegogo. Not 100% people buy 6-pack, some people buy 12-pack, 24-pack. And so we can sort of estimate pretty accurately with Shopify what's going to be the range of average order value that we're going to generate from a single customer, which is like, what is that final revenue that's going to come into our bank? And then when you subtract all of the cost of goods, fulfillment, whatever other cost that goes into it, you get your gross profit. And then from there, we kind of view that as, okay, this is the profit that we're going to take home if somebody organically came. Now, we're willing to spend advertising money to break even. At least that was our thinking at the time. We didn't raise our Series A yet, so it's not like we had more money to sort of overspend and sort of at the sake of growth. We had to actually be sustainable. But given our sort of margin, which is we make a single bottle for about 40 cents, we sell it for like $5, which is high, but it's actually not abnormal in a beverage industry. This is like 90 to 95% margin. When we calculate everything, our AOV came down to be about $45. With everything gone, we were making about $30. So that gave us a $30 per customer acquisition that we can play with.
That's a lot, right?
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot, but it's not uncommon. And we then took it and just went with it, just A/B tested everything. We started with just simple things like phrases, creatives. But then for us, to us, that was like a very minor optimization. We were really trying to find what's like the real arbitrage opportunities that we have, because everyone's doing the same thing on Facebook. We found two things that were really compelling that worked for us after testing. One is we found out that the medium is the most important source of acquisition, not the actual content. Like, we can say all these things that we want from the brand page, but it appears like an ad. Like, of course, we're going to say good things about Morning Recovery. We are the Morning Recovery. And so we would actually pay third-party Facebook groups and pages that already had millions and millions of followers to write posts or anything that we wanted, but in a very neutral way. And then we would pay them almost like an affiliate fee. And so we had things like trending on Kickstarter was something that was a page that promoted some of our content, and we found out that they do just like 5-6 times better in conversion, which then leads to much lower CAC than if we were to say the exact same thing from our page, which was interesting. And we just found out that it made sense, of course, after we did it, because it's a skeptical product by nature. And if we advertise it, it's even more skeptical. The more that we sort of neutralize it and sort of work with third-party trusted sources, it just did better. Second thing was directing people to our website versus directing people to our sort of press articles like Business Insider. The latter was much better, which seems counterintuitive, because instead of taking people to point of purchase, we're now taking them away, and there's an extra layer in the funnel. But what we found out is that people need to be able to trust this, and you need to lower the barrier of skepticism. And so when they go to Business Insider article that talks about how a Tesla engineer created this, we found out that then they go to Google, search for this, and then buy it at a much higher end-to-end conversion than if we were to directly somehow get you to land on our website, which then they would just bounce out.
I like that. So the top of your funnel is building trust, because it's a product that is not easily understood right away, right? It's not like a t-shirt you're selling or something that people instantly get in their minds. Is that first step is to build trust, and to do that, you have some kind of neutral party. In the two examples you gave, is either some kind of publication that wrote about you, some publication that has some that people already trust to write about you, or in a Facebook group. So these you mentioned that you want them to write about you in a neutral way. Can you say more about this? Like, why neutral rather than in a more positive review?
We tried it. We tried both, and for whatever reason, neutral did a lot better. What we kind of found out was that it's a fine balance, right? Like, it's still sponsored by us, And so the more we made it seem very organic, so I wouldn't say the word neutral. It was definitely more positive, but it wasn't sort of overly blown, like a review of it. It was more like, guess what? Like, guess what's trending out there? Check this product out. Like that kind of tone.
I see.
Yeah, and so with digital funnels, I think the beauty is that you can have a lot of strong opinions, and that's great. That's probably gonna kickstart your experiments much faster than other people in the right way. But I think the key is just like super fast execution and just like validating your hypothesis, because like everything can be measurable. And so we tried so many things. I think in the first month of our Shopify launch, the actual amount of different variations of funnels that we've launched and tested is probably over 200. Definitely over 200.
So how do you manage all of this? How do you keep track of like what experiments you're running?
Like at the core, like there would be, 5 or 6 big different funnels that we would test. Testing something on Facebook, testing something on Google, testing something elsewhere like Instagram. And then, between those, we would then branch it out. On Facebook, we would try it on our page versus we would try it on a different group. And then within that, the content is varied. Sometimes we would try this copy versus that. So like it all just adds up to this like massive amount of tests. We don't have enough like budget to simultaneously test 200 things and get statistically significant results. So, we would start by like 2, 3, 4 at a time. And then we would just like take out the ones that just didn't perform as well. And we would sort of keep trying to beat the most efficient funnel at the time. So like in terms of how do we do it? I mean, again, I think this is where like our skill set came in handy. Like it was, at the time we also recruited one of our friends who ran e-commerce at Facebook Canada, this is what he does for e-commerce companies. So between him and myself and my friend at Uber, we would just manage it. Like we were acting like a media agency out there because, like my friend had the skill sets, like that's what he was doing at Facebook, but not on the agency side, but on the actual Facebook platform side. I've done similar things, just building funnels. And so we would manage it. And the great thing is like, because we were using existing advertising platforms like Google and Facebook, we didn't have to build any of the actual infrastructure. We just use their tools, advertising tools. We look at it, we measure it. We know our Google Analytics on our website, so we understand the conversion. It integrates perfectly with Shopify. So with every advertising, we can actually see the attribute on revenue. So it just makes things really, really simple. And yeah, I think this is just something that most people, I'm sure, all successful e-commerce companies do, right? It's performance advertising. You measure your LTV, you measure your CAC, you scale this as efficiently as possible. But even for like beginners, I think this is something that is just very easy to get started. Even if you don't get to the most optimal funnel state, between one versus another that you have ideas on what might work best, you can simply try it and then figure out. And if you have enough of gross profit margin, the amount of advertising that you spend, you're actually not losing money, right? Like you do need upfront capital investment. So when we launched an Indiegogo, the great thing is like, guess what? We made $250,000. So, that's money that we can use. But because we understood our average order value, when we spend as ads, yes, like there's some time lag where if we spend, let's say $10,000 on advertising in that week, we don't make it right away. But we do make it pretty soon. And then so it goes back to our bank. So really we're not losing money. And so that just kind of allows you to sort of be able to, test more frequently. Right now, we actually spend more than our gross profit deliberately because, we raise more money. But I think even if you don't raise money, there's some level that you can play with. And if the margins are much smaller, all it means is that you probably have a little bit more lesser room to experiment with. So maybe you can't do 200 experiments like us, but you can certainly, start with a couple. And I think even just like optimizing at a smaller frequency is very powerful.
Awesome. So morningrecoverydrink.com is a website. What's next for you guys? What are some big milestones you want to hit next?
Yeah, so 2 big things. One is we're finally getting into retail world and wholesale. Right now, we're across about 400 different stores nationwide in the US, which sounds a lot, but in grand scheme of things, still very small in the retail world. But ultimately, when we view our product, we think drinking is a very serendipitous event. You go to the bar, maybe you would go to different nightlife venues. Not always planned. Not everything's a big night, but you simply go there. And so we want our drinks to be there We want our bartenders to sort of upsell this, encourage people to drink it. We think it's a much better and healthier alternative than Red Bull, which is our things that are being always upsold in these places. And so I think it's a matter of when, not an if, the retail world. And we're finally starting to explore there and really just like learn and navigate. The second thing for us is actually international. So surprisingly, Indiegogo, when we launched, 35% of the sales came internationally, mostly centered around Western Europe. Like people, basically places where people speak English. But we can't just launch there because there's a different compliance rules for every country. So for the similar reasons why, even though I'm Canadian, we don't actually sell this in Canada because the regulation is different. And so we can't launch everywhere at once. It's going to come down to understanding both sort of, the resources it's going to take to get regulations in that country versus what our existing demand is there, and potentially what is the upper bound sort of market opportunity. And we're going to go sort of one at a time and start unlocking international markets because I think that's huge for us. And even today, like we have thousands of customers that are sort of emailing us as to, why can I buy this at my country? So I think those are the big things for us.
Very cool. So even though you guys have already generated $6 million in revenue so far, it sounds like it's just the beginning for you. Lots of growth ahead. Thank you again so much for your time, Sisun.
Thank you.
Here's a sneak peek for what's in store in the next Shopify Masters episode.
Most of the content that we now put on Instagram is actually customer created.
Thanks for listening to Shopify Masters, the e-commerce marketing podcast for ambitious entrepreneurs. To start your store today, visit shopify.com/masters to claim your extended 30-day free trial. Also, for this episode's show notes, head over to shopify.com/blog.